Hello, my name is Corey Miller, and for this week's discussion, I had the opportunity to interview Mr. Lindsey Reed, who is the Vice President of Student Affairs at Athens Technical College. I interviewed Mr. Reed today, September 19th, and the conversation was about 30 minutes in length, and we started around 3 p.m. Our method of contact was through telephone. So to give you a little bit of background information on Mr. Reed, he's actually been with Athens Technical College for about 24 years. He started at Athens Tech as the Director of Admissions. Then he moved into the position of Executive Director of the Walton County campus. And he is currently the Vice President of Student Affairs. Prior to coming to Athens Technical College, Mr. Reed actually worked at Fort Valley State University in the recruitment as the recruitment coordinator. So he was again still in student affairs. So a couple things that kind of stood out to me in the conversation with Mr. Reed as it relates to being a great supervisor. A couple qualities that he mentioned, and he mentioned several times throughout our conversation, was that you have to be respectful, but you also have to get respect from the people that work under you. He also mentioned the importance of being an active listener, being open-minded, having patience, and also transparency. And we'll go into a little more detail about each one of those as I give you a little more information about the discussion. So one question that I asked Mr. Reed was, how do you foster a positive and inclusive work environment within your team? The first thing that he said to me is building relationship is key. He said to look for teachable moments and always strive to help your staff to develop their own management styles. So when he was talking about those management styles, he was actually talking about the different directors that fall under student affairs. He mentioned that everyone that you supervise is going to be different, so you have to make sure that you're flexible and you have to know the different personalities of the people you work with. He also talked about your different management styles. He said a lot of times you can't have just one management style, you actually have to have blended styles. Now let's talk about transparency for a moment, because that was one of the skills that he mentioned was transparency. So he said with transparency and leadership that it's a very important role in being a good leader. He said, although you may not be able to give your staff all the information about different things, that you have to make sure that your staff understands why you're giving them certain directives. An analogy he gave that stood out to me was he talked about a giraffe and a turtle. When you think about a giraffe is tall and can see a lot of things because it's a lot taller than your average animal. So he said giraffe is going to always see the bigger picture. So they'll know all the details, the whys, the hows, the whens, the what, the where. But when you look at the turtle, they're lower on the ground, they're slow moving, so they're not going to have as much visibility. Or if you think about in a workforce, maybe it's not as much knowledge or know details about certain things. So the turtle cannot see everything, but you don't want to leave that turtle in the blind. So being that giraffe, you also have to let the turtle know certain things. So I really appreciated that analogy that he gave in our conversation, and it stood out to me. Another question that I asked Lindsey Reed was what advice that he had for someone just starting in a supervisory role. Couple things that he mentioned. He mentioned being an active listener. So always asking questions. So one of the questions that he said he always asks people, no matter what the conversation may be about, is, what are their thoughts? So always getting that input from your faculty and staff and valuing that input. Another question that was asked was, how do you manage your own workload while ensuring you are available and supportive to your team? And he said two things. He said prioritize, and he also mentioned that he is the master of sticky notes. So I kind of chuckled when we were talking when he mentioned that, because that's something that I do now in my current position. It's like I have sticky notes everywhere. So prioritizing was a really good thing that he brought out, and I really appreciated that from him. What are some common challenges faced as a supervisor, and how were they addressed? That was another question that was asked. And he immediately said personalities. So with that, when you say personalities in the workforce, when you're in a supervisor position, and especially in a division such as student affairs, there's multiple people that you're dealing with, several different departments. You have registration of records, admissions, financial aid, student support, a huge array of departments and a lot of different people that you're working with. So he said a lot of times the personalities of the people that you supervise can be a challenge. He made the statement, it's not the work, it's the personalities. And he gave a good example. He talked about the children in the household. So I have two kids of my own, and they're totally different. They're raised in the same household. They've been taught the same beliefs. They see the same thing, within their parents, but they're totally different. So he was like, in the workforce, in a supervisor position, you're always going to have different personalities. And dealing with those personalities, he again referred back to what he discussed in the very beginning of our conversation, is that developing relationships is a key. He also mentioned again about the differentiated management styles, being flexible. And another thing that really stood out to me, and I quote exactly the way he said it, he said, never go into a conversation thinking that you have all of the answers. And that one kind of stood out to me, because a lot of times when you're in a supervisory role, I have actually worked with supervisors where it's always their way or no way. They don't want to listen to other sides on different matters. So I really appreciated that he made that statement. And then he kind of ended that question with saying to be open. A couple other things that stood out to me in the conversation was he discussed being approachable, but also at the same time maintaining authority with people that you supervise. And a direct quote from him, he said, I laugh and joke, but I don't play. So kind of what he meant by that is, the people on his staff, they kind of know when it's a serious time, but they also know that he is approachable, that they can come to him, they can have a conversation with him, that he's human just like they are. And so he said it's important that he has an open door policy. He often has interaction with individuals on his team that are away from the workday. He allows them to see that he is human, and that helps to maintain a level of respect. He also mentioned the importance of being cordial and professional, and always looking for opportunities to let staff know that he appreciates what they do. So overall, in closing, kind of a few things that I kind of took away from this conversation with Lindsay Reed was some words of wisdom that stood out to me. So he said, be an active listener, be tuned in to what is going on, build relationships. You're not going to please everyone. If you want to please everyone, sell ice creams. I really like that point that he made. And he also, 3 other things that stood out to me, just to kind of close this. He said, don't act on a whim, be fair, and get to know something about all staff in your department, whether it's student affairs or whatever it may be in higher education. And this will allow you to make connections. And then lastly, in closing, the one thing that I did not mention was that we did talk about professional development. and being a supervisor. So the question I asked him was, how do you perceive the role of professional development in higher education, and what impact do you think it has on faculty and staff? Because that was one of the things that we discussed in the readings for this week. So he did say that professional development does have a tremendous impact. Early on, have conversations with your staff to establish the goals of your faculty and staff members. Conversations should be ongoing, always foster growth, and give your definition of success, and also allow your staff members to give that same definition of success, and that'll allow you to help them better. So with this conversation with Mr. Reed, I gained a lot of insight on being a supervisor in higher education, and I appreciated the time that he took out of his busy schedule so that we could sit down and kind of discuss these things. So that's kind of all that I have for this discussion post, but I look forward to reading or listening to everyone's videos for this week. I hope that you all have a great week.